Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of Beneath the Covers, and today we're looking at the seminal Kiss album Destroyer from 1976. It's an interesting phase for this band as they morph from being hard rockers to superheroes, and that's reflected very much in the cartoonish type artwork that adorn not only this album but the subsequent album Love Gun. Of course, this album follows hard on the success of the Alive album. Now, the Alive album was phenomenally successful for them, and it breathed life into those rather lackluster and limp recordings of their first three albums, studio albums. It more or less presented people with the testimony as to what all the fuss was about. You know, it certainly demonstrated that this band were a loud, abrasive, punishing act to see live. But with the Destroyer album, of course, the big difference between that album and the previous albums is Bob Ezrin gets involved. Now, Peter Criss said on meeting Bob Ezrin, I realised that I knew nothing about anything. And Bob Ezrin, of course, is responsible for all the tones and textures that make this album what it is. The voices, the choral arrangements, the strings, the sound effects, all that sort of stuff is very much down to Bob Ezrin. The cover art for Destroyer was painted by fantasy artist Ken Kelly, who was working at the time for Warren Publications. Now, apparently it was actually Peter Criss, via Peter Criss's wife, that introduced Ken Kelly to the band as a potential artist for the band's next album, of course, which would be Destroyer. Interestingly, Ken Kelly wasn't the band's first choice. They had originally approached fantasy artist Frank Frazetta, but unfortunately he was just unavailable. Kelly has written that he was invited to see the band live before he took on the commission, and he said he was just absolutely blown away by the power and volume and stage show of this band. On meeting with Casablanca, Kelly was informed that the image they wanted was the band kind of leaping out of the album sleeve with lots of fire behind them. The original cover featured the band wearing their Alive costumes, standing in front of a city that was all ablaze, all rubble and debris. And of course, and the tones as well, it employs dark brown, sepia, reddish tones. It looks very hellish. But the record company felt that this cover was just way too violent. Perhaps they, at this point, were looking at repackaging and presenting this band to a much younger audience, perhaps. But anyway, of course, a different cover was commissioned. The original artwork has recently been reinstated on the last release of the Destroyer album, the last edition of it. It was called Destroyer Resurrected, of course, which added some outtakes and the original artwork. The original artwork for the album was painted in oils using various slides and album covers, I think, as references for what the band looked like. But again, as I said, the record company felt that this original rendering, the original cover, was far too violent. It looked as if the band had caused all the destruction that was behind them, and they felt that wasn't the image they were going for. Of course, with the new sleeve that we know so well, we see the band wearing their new costumes, newly designed costumes, rather than the costumes that were on the Kiss Alive album. And we see them descending down with a background of blue, of course, which is far brighter, far more optimistic. Interestingly, Kelly actually receives no royalties from the sales of the Destroyer album. He was commissioned and paid to do the artwork only. It was kind of a done deal, if you like. However, when asked where the artwork actually was now, he said he believed that the artwork that was on the Destroyer Resurrected, the first draft, so to speak, is owned by Gene Simmons. But the second draft, the second piece of artwork, which obviously adorns the album cover now, was unfortunately lost in a fire. Certainly in keeping with the theme of the album, I guess. Anyway, I'd like to say thank you for watching another episode of Beneath the Covers. I hope you're all keeping well and warm during this festive season. As always, I thank you for your support and your patronage. So stay safe and do keep listening.